Begin Self-Publishing, episode number 37. How do you revive sales in a book that doesn't sell?
Interested in self-publishing but don't know where to start? Want to get your book onto Amazon? Want to hold your paperback book in your hands? Learn how on the Begin Self-Publishing podcast with your host, Tim Lewis.
In today's show, I'm going to talk about something that I've had to consider lately. I've just finished writing the second book in my Magpies and Magic book series, which is a light fantasy book, following on to the first book in the series, which I published last March. The issue I keep coming round to is in promoting the second book in the series, I need to try and revive the series itself. I'll be completely frank with you, the sales of the first book have been beyond disappointing, virtually to the point of non-existent. The first book in the series just doesn't sell. Now, I made quite a few mistakes in launching the first book in the series. While it's had a few good reviews, it's the fact that it just hasn't ever got any traction in any markets. I didn't spend enough time giving out free copies in the first case. And I also put the book in KDP Select, mainly because I wanted to try out KDP Select. But the trouble was that all of the options I'd used for getting reviews with my first books, like Time Shock, I couldn't use with this because it was in KDP Select and it wasn't easy to give out review copies. I also didn't spend enough time tracking down reviewers and sending them emails asking them to review the book. I also think that actually having just one book in a series with no obvious second book coming meant that a lot of people didn't want to invest in reading a book in a series where they couldn't see any evidence that the series would be completed. So now that I've finished the editing of book 2, what do? I obviously want to release the second book in the series, and I'll be doing that in the next month. But before I do that, I really want to get some more traction in reviving book 1 in the Magpies and Magic series. I do actually think it's quite a good book for those people who like my fairly non-descriptive, fast-moving fantasy style. So I've had to give it a certain amount of thought. I do believe that it's possible to revive sales of a non-selling book, whatever anybody might say. I could understand if it had loads of poor reviews, then I'd just accept it was a poor book and it wasn't selling for that reason. But in general, the book's had good reviews. It just hasn't had enough reviews or impact. So it's much more of a marketing problem in my mind than actually being a quality issue with the book. There's a possibility that the cover isn't appropriate. Though again, I don't actually think the cover's that bad. The cover was cheaper than the ones I did for the Time Shop book, and is much more obviously clip art related, but it looks fairly nice from an ebook point of view. It's simple, but it's not a bad cover. So I don't think the cover's the issue. So I think it's actually just a case of putting the book out there more. So what I'm going to attempt to do is to push out an old book, do almost like a new release of the first book before doing the release of the second book in the series. I know it's going to be a lot more work than if I did a new release. Amazon has lots of new release charts, and also in general people like to promote new stuff rather than old things. But I'm going to try to do it anyway. I've considered making this first book perma-free, but at the moment I don't think I'm going to do this. I think it's quite hard if you've only got 2 books in a series, if you've got one book and then you have just one payable book. From a revenue perspective, it's not a great idea. And also, the fact is that I don't know when I'm going to get round to writing the third book in the series. It'll probably be next year. I'm also not convinced that without some pre-existing publicity and sales that actually making the book perma-free will work. When I made my Time Shock, I Want My Life Back perma-free, it already had a little bit of traction in the Amazon paid market. It wasn't a phenomenal amount, but I think it was enough that it was in the also bought to people on Amazon and that people knew about the book before it went free. Just making a book free doesn't mean that it's automatically going to be downloaded by lots of people. So I'm not convinced with a book that hasn't really ever taken off, making it free is the thing to do, at least to begin with. So in my opinion, I'm going to make the book 99 cents for a limited time period to see if that revives the book in the first instance. I'm also going to change the categories as well. There's a slight issue I discovered with making the book both young and new adult and giving an age range. I've resolved that now, so hopefully it should appear in more categories in Amazon, which will give me more chance of ranking for something. I had a look at the K-Lytics report that I got about the fantasy categories, and I've tried to make sure that the book is now in a series of categories, so that if I do manage to get some sales, it can push into some charts more easily. Of course, there's no certainty to any of this, and I'm not innocent enough to believe that just by setting it to 99 cents and changing the categories, it's suddenly going to appear in the book chart. I know I've got to do a lot more work than that, especially as it's not a new book. So I'm going to make use of my existing social media channels, so Twitter, Facebook, Pinterest. I'm probably going to run another Goodreads giveaway on the book, this time in the US, and I'll also start getting Facebook ads pushing towards the book again. I've also got a few other ideas of places where I can get exposure for the first book. And if that works, then I'll also use this for the second book when it comes out next month. So in effect, I'm trying to do a new release for an old book, fully of the understanding that this may well not work. But at the moment, the book is currently something like 1.6 million in the Amazon.com. So I'm going to attempt to at least push it up to something reasonable-ish, at least for a certain amount of sales. Having one sale a month on a book is not great. And I know that this is actually a problem that a lot of people face. So I'll let you know how I get on with my efforts to revive Magpies and Magic from its slumbering level of sales in the US Amazon store in the forthcoming shows. Talking about updates, I've got an update on the Readsy editor that I mentioned last week. They've now changed it so that you don't get published by Readsy on the ebook version. It now says published by your name. Now, for my purposes, this is still not really exactly what I want, but for a lot of writers, this will be exactly what they want if they've set up their account with their author name as the author name on the book. So I think this is an improvement, and they're certainly reacting to the criticism. So I think they'll start making more changes as the months come on, and I'll let you know as I try it out every other week to see what's changed. I'd like to give a shout out to Stefan CC123, who left me a very nice review in the iTunes New Zealand store. But they did make one criticism which I've tried to address, which was the male voice in the middle of my previous episodes. The reason why I put this in is that I actually paid for that, about $5 for that male voiceover thing, so I felt I had to use it. But I do take that it was maybe a bit stark, and I've decided not to include it in my later broadcasts. So I've listened to this and I've removed the male voice from the middle of the podcast. Thank you to all the other people who have also reviewed my show in the UK and the US store. It means a lot in terms of how my show ranks in the iTunes stores if people leave reviews. I know it's a real pain because the only easy way to do it is to actually go into the iTunes app, select the store, and then click to leave a review. There's lots of podcasts that I've listened to that I've not yet left a review for, so I can fully understand why people don't leave that many reviews. But if you do get the chance, please leave a review for this show, because it helps me to remember to keep doing it and to spend more time on getting interviews and things, like I've been a bit slack late. And it also helped me keep going so that maybe I get to 50 or 100 shows. Thanks to everybody for listening to the show, and I'll talk to you guys next week.
Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed today's show, please stop by iTunes and rate and leave a review. This helps make the show more visible. For free resources, show notes, and other helpful content, join the community at beginselfpublishing.com.